the overall ecosystem works, as if there is no chain at the back end. Now, this is a project essentially that I've been incubating at Polygon. It's known as Quantum Labs. It's being built by one of the payment companies that essentially has been there in the space for almost 2 years. And yeah, so since I don't have too many slides, I just have 2 slides. So first of all, like everyone wants to build, in the payment space, everyone like says, how many of you heard like crypto payments is like so easy, why is not everyone using crypto payments? Like almost everyone listens to that, but then at the end, still everyone is not using it, right? And also like if you look at all these blockchains that are getting created, the biggest problem that is happening is there is a massive amount of liquidity, or there's a massive amount of assets that are lying on the blockchain which have no use case. A very random question, but how many of you hold USDC but it is not invested in any protocol or it is not earning any yield? Almost everyone. So like the logic of building quantum essentially is something where you're trying to go out and accumulate or have assets which, irrespective of whether you have deployed it anywhere or irrespective of whether you're using it anywhere, it gives you a yield. The way it works is, essentially with Polygon we have a concept that we have been developing which is known as stake the bridge. Just for context, almost all the bridges, like let's say top 10 bridges combined, they hold more than $50 billion worth of asset. And all that $50 billion is earning zero interest. Giving you an example, let's say the business model of Circle. The business model of Circle is they have $34 billion in their bank account and they're earning 5% of that $33 billion, the money which is yours, which you have given them, they are earning the yield, and what they are giving you, nothing. So that essentially the thought process came out from that perspective itself. How can you actually create a liquidity layer where all the assets, irrespective of what state they are, because like if you look at, let me paint some users in front of you. A lot of OTC players, like a lot of OTC, let's say you are a whale and you hold a huge amount of asset like Bitcoin, Ethereum, all these assets, and you want to go out and sell your Bitcoin because you have achieved the target price that you had, and you want to convert them into fiat, into stable coins. Once you have done that, essentially what happens is this money is lying on chain idle. If I just give you another context, USDT, the top 100 accounts hold more than 40 billion USDT out of like 100 billion, and this is basically not earning a single dollar yield. Now what we are technically trying to go out and do in this architecture is, we're trying to go out and use the logic of stake the bridge. So any asset that essentially is bridged to quantum as a layer 2 is essentially going out and being staked in protocols which essentially like could be SDAI. So what I do is, let's say, walking you through one of the transactions. So let's say you have 100 USDC. What happens is you go out and so let's say any of the chains which are there, you have, let's say on Ethereum you have 100 USDC and you want to bridge it to quantum. So essentially what will happen is, the moment you click on bridge, the transaction it initiates, it takes your USDC, converts it into a yield generating asset, let's say SDAI, let's say money market funds like Benji, Biddle and all those assets, and locks it there. So your fund on the parent contract is now a yield generating. On the other chain that you have bridged out, essentially you are still getting the same asset which is USDC, and hence what you can do is, now you can use your USDC freely, but the yield is getting generated, which I can go out and distribute to you, to other dApps which are building, and hence technically you do not need to kind of depend 100% on any token to give out yields. Another thing that, so the way it works is like, I've created like 3 different categories which are there: ZK rollups and EVM chains, OP rollups, optimistic rollups, and non-EVM chains. With ZK chains, essentially what happens is, every time you're doing a transaction, or EVM chains, whatever is every time you're doing a transaction, you're achieving the finality of those chains. Hence, technically, you do not need additional layer of security for the finality. On optimistic chains, essentially what happens is, because you have a 7-day native withdrawal period, those chains are like computed when you're withdrawing your assets. So in that, in OP rollups, essentially what we're doing is, optimistic rollups, what we're doing is, we're using an ABS restake model, which is known as Vital. Now what Vital does is, Vital goes out and proves your chain at every given point of time. Which means, let's say I'm bridging my assets from Optimism, or anything is happening on Optimism, Vital is actually going out and computing that chain at every given point of time. Which means that any movement that I want to do from optimistic chains, I can do it immediately with finality. And so that is how we achieve a faster speed in using optimistic chains. Then essentially on our chain, what we are using is another ABS which is called as MAC. So that is the second ABS that we are using. In MAC, essentially what happens is, it enables you to go out and communicate a commit from Quantum to any other chain telling that the transaction has reached finality, you can withdraw your assets. So this essentially enables us to go out and withdraw money at a faster speed. So just like a centralized exchange, I can have that speed of withdrawals. And from that perspective, we're able to go out and create the overall ecosystem where you can go out and bridge your assets quickly, you can withdraw your assets quickly. Every asset that is there on the chain essentially gives you a yield. And because of this, essentially a lot of liquidity, which essentially is sitting idle on a lot of other chains, can actually just lie idle here as well. All I'm asking you is just click on one button and let your liquidity be idle here, but you earn a yield. So technically that is where we kind of get and attract liquidity. And once you have that kind of a liquidity, then you can build more financial apps and assets on top of it. So that is like the overall architecture of what we are trying to go out and do in Quantum. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Happy to answer any questions.
We'll take one question and move on.
Yeah, if I'm understanding this right, essentially people can bridge their tokens to your network, and once they bridge it to your network, you're able to earn yield for them.
Correct.
But one thing I'm not fully understanding is, why does this need to be on a network? Why can't this just be some sort of staking protocol that you build natively on each chain?
Because technically, the assets that I'm bringing here, I want to build dApps on top of it. If this becomes a dApp, then building assets on top of that dApp becomes a lot difficult. Plus, then essentially when you're bridging, you cannot have on a protocol level, you still cannot achieve that kind of faster finalities, because then you will have to depend on the finality of that chain. So assume, let's say this is Ethereum chain itself, then essentially I will have to wait for 13 minutes to achieve that finality of Ethereum, because I'm dependent upon each finality. Here I can use MAC and achieve a faster finality based on what I want.
Especially in terms of a failed transaction, how you are going to track and how resilient is your architecture as well?
As a failed transaction when you're bridging?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so from failed transaction, if the asset essentially is not bridged, then technically what you do is you just reverse the lock that you have, the transaction swap that you have created, and give the original asset back.
How resilient in terms of architecture as well?
So from an architecture perspective, that's why because we are wanting to bring volume here, the idea is that, to leverage ETH. So one of the things that I did not tell was all the ETH that essentially I'm converting in this network. So let's say you bridge your ETH from L1 to this network. All that ETH that essentially is coming in, I can actually leverage that ETH to put it on all the ABS. So that means with passing time, my ABS bridge is getting more and more secure because it is getting restaked ETH on top of it. So the security will increase with time.
Okay. Even the ETH will be quantified as well, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. If you have any more questions, I think you can just connect with Aishwary right after this. Thank you so much, Aishwary. Next up, we have Robin from the Avail project. He's here to talk about